The meeting is now live.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna. Good afternoon. My name is Darren Sanders. I am Portsmouth City Council's Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness. This is the first public meeting of the portfolio since March 2020 and is in line with a government directive that, unlike Parliament, all local council meetings should be held in person rather than people coming in as a hybrid or anything like that. Please be assured that we're in the Guildhall in Portsmouth City Council, so it's a Guildhall, have put appropriate cleansing and social distancing measures in place to ensure that this meeting is undertaken in a COVID-secure manner. So I'm in front of a Perspex box, or behind a Perspex glass, which is probably a good thing, and everyone is sitting at least 6 feet apart, which is fantastic. Other measures include a request for all attendees to have taken, it's down here as LFD, but it's what people know as a lateral flow test within 48 hours of the meeting, the use of the NHS Track and Trace app or attendee log, 2 metre social distancing, which I can tell you is being observed, the wearing of masks when not seated, which is also being observed, a one-way system in the Guildhall, which is new, and a temperature check upon arrival. It says limited public seating has been made available. However, this meeting is also being webcast, so hello, to allow the public to attend it remotely if they so wish, but the politicians can't. Please be advised that the public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting, which may or may not be a good thing. I'm under orders to ask members to remain seated throughout the duration of the meeting and again to wear a face covering unless seated. We've got no deputations, do we?
None.
Right, thank you very much. I now have to do a few housekeeping duties. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not use the lifts. Please assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in front of the civic offices, in front of the several hundred people who are graduating today. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the reception, Guildhall reception desk, should sign out with what can only looks to me on this piece of paper as something like Caveffe, leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. I've also got to draw everyone's attention that this is going to be live streamed. Everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera, so you sadly have me at the moment. And that includes making deputations, but there aren't any. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting, which it shouldn't do, nor records those stating explicitly they don't wish to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they've finished. So, apologies for that being long, but I think that covers everything. So my role is now to try and see if this camera will move to various people. So I will go from right to left, if that's okay. Can I start with the person I know as Maria?
It's Maria Cole, representing the Residents' Consortium.
And I'm delighted the camera is working on you, madam. That's excellent news. Scott, good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon, Councillor Darren Sanders. It is Councillor Scott Pater Harris Hillsey Ward, and I'm the Conservative spokesperson for Housing and Preventing Homelessness.
Thank you very much. Good to see you. James.
Good afternoon, Councillor Sanders. James Hill, Director of Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services.
Sarah.
Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Wiltshire, Rough Sleeper Coordinator.
Thank you, Sarah. Cal.
Good afternoon, everyone. Cal Corkery, one of the councillors for Charles Dickens Ward and Labour spokesperson for Housing.
Thank you very much. Wayne.
Hello, I'm Wayne Layton. I'm a Finance Manager here at Portsmouth City Council.
Excellent. Nicola.
Good afternoon. I'm Nicola Clanahan, Temporary Head of Housing Needs Advice and Support.
Thank you, Nicola. Joe.
Afternoon, Joe Bennett, Head of Business Growth, Play and Youth.
And last but by no means least, Anna.
Anna Martin, Local Democracy Officer.
Lovely. Okay. So the first item on this agenda is any apologies for absence, and we ain't got any. The second item is what's called declarations of interest. Do Cal or Scott have anything interesting to declare that's related to this meeting? Nope. Right, lovely. So we move to item 3, which is the updated safeguarding policy for play, youth and community services. Who's introducing? So I understand it might be Joe, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Joe. Fire away.
Thank you. The report looks to update the safeguarding policy for play, youth and community services, and it seeks approval to implement the updated policy operated by Housing, Neighbourhood and Buildings in our settings. There is a policy attached to Appendix A, which I'll take you through in a moment. As background, the Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services operates 17 services across the city for the provision of services for children, young people and adults. We collectively refer to those settings as PYC, or Play, Youth and Community. The Play, Youth and Community Services are committed to safeguarding children and adults who use these settings, and this policy reflects the necessity of that responsibility. Policy brings up to date the working practices and requirements for staff reflecting the service changes which have recently taken place, and looks to refresh the existing policy to ensure the policy reflects current practice and demonstrates our commitment to the safeguarding of our customers. Play, Youth and Community Services have been supported and advised by the Portsmouth Safeguarding Children's Partnership in the design of our policy and our practices for safeguarding children, the delivery of training to our staff in our self-assessment processes. Training for safeguarding adults has also been included as a new addition to the policy in line with the relevant training identified by the Portsmouth Safeguarding Adult Board. The reasons for recommendation are to formalise the working practices of the Play, Youth and Community Service, to ensure that all staff and volunteers understand their role in safeguarding of children, young people and adults, and to provide information for all third parties working with our service. Are you happy for me to take you through the report, the policy quickly?
Well, I am. I don't know about anyone else, but I am.
You're the chair, that's the key. Thank you. So, local authorities have an overarching responsibility for safeguarding and promoting the welfare of all children and young people in their area, and have a number of statutory functions in doing this. Throughout the document, we use terms children and young people, and we also refer to vulnerable adults. Effectively, the policy applies to all three of those groups. Safeguarding and promoting the welfare of children is defined for the purposes of this policy as protecting children from maltreatment, preventing impairment of children's health or development, ensuring that children grow up in circumstances consistent with the provision of safe and effective care, and taking action to enable all children to have the best outcomes. Safeguarding is a term which is broader than child protection and relates to the actions taken to promote the welfare of children and protects them from harm. Safeguarding is everyone's responsibility with duty within and out of our workplaces. As we move to adult safeguarding, the local authority has responsibility for safeguarding vulnerable adults, and this is also information on the Care Act in relation to safeguarding and how this important piece of law protects vulnerable people by changing the way that safeguarding is placed on a statutory footing. Safeguarding vulnerable adults is everybody's business and depends on people understanding and doing the following things: being aware of the risks of abuse and neglect that vulnerable adults can face, knowing that help is available and understanding their responsibilities, working together to report and investigate concerns, and working together to prevent abuse and neglect. Living a life that is free from harm and abuse is a fundamental right of every person. All of us need to sign up to this principle and to follow it in acting as good neighbours and citizens. The policy then goes into an overview and talks about the key principles that we're committed to. And it goes through, for Play, Youth and Community, the key points are: the welfare of the child is paramount. No child or group of children must be treated any less favourably than others, being able to access services which meet their particular need. All children without exception have the right to protection from abuse, regardless of their gender, ethnicity, culture, disability, age, sexuality or religious beliefs. All concerns and allegations of abuse will be taken seriously by staff and volunteers and responded to appropriately, and this may require a referral to the local Safeguarding Children's Partnership or the local authority designated officer. Play and Youth Services have a commitment to safer recruitment, selection and vetting, and all settings will aim to ensure that all young people meet in a safe environment with people they can trust. There are a number of other policies, and this policy doesn't exclude those, and those are listed thereafter. There's then a statement of purpose for each of the services, which I won't go into because I'll be reading to you forever. And it talks about the scope. As we move into staff and volunteering, it talks about the recruitment of staff and volunteers. And the key principle here is that all staff and volunteers in the service are required to go through a safer recruitment process. Suitable references must be received before being in the workplace, and all staff and volunteers are required to have an up-to-date DBS check. This is to be renewed at least every 3 years. Whilst waiting to receive a DBS check, a risk assessment will be carried out, and all new staff must work alongside a fully vetted and trained member of staff until the DBS check is completed. We then talk a little bit about DBSs, which I won't go into detail of because I don't need the technicalities. And there's then an explanation again that volunteers are to attend a taster session with the relevant service to see if they are suitable for the role. These sessions must be supervised by a fully vetted member of staff, and the member of staff will be in the presence of the volunteer at all times. Following this, if the volunteer is to continue, a full DBS check must be seen by the centre manager before the volunteering commences. Volunteers are also required to complete an induction process and to attend supervision in the same format employed staff do. There's then a safeguarding training explanation and details of how each member of staff is trained. And then as we move on to induction and probation, it talks about how all newly appointed staff and volunteers will take part in a formal process. Supervision as well talks to all staff required to have regular recorded supervision sessions with their managers. These will usually be monthly, however some of our posts have very small hours, such as 3 hours a week, and in those circumstances monthly wouldn't be suitable, so there's a slight extension there at management discretion. Safeguarding issues are to be disclosed at every supervision session, ensuring that staff have a clear understanding about policies and procedures in place. For our community centres, our hirers have hire agreements that also require that they meet a set of standards to know that our children are safe. Each service has a designated safeguarding lead who has specific responsibilities, and these are detailed as well within the process. There's then a little bit of information sharing at the end of the policy. I don't think I've got anything further to add. Happy to.
Okay, that's kind, Jo. So for people watching, what I will do is that I will ask firstly Maria and then Cal and Scott to ask any questions. Maria on behalf of the Residents Consortium, Cal on behalf of the Labour Group. I was going to say the Conservative Group for a second, but I will get killed, frankly, if I did that. And Scott on behalf of the Conservative Group. And then I will then endeavour to sum up and also ask the same on behalf of the Liberal Democrat administration. So, Maria, did you have anything?
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered how playgroups and youth clubs go about advertising for vacancies. I've been trying to get some stuff over to the Adventure Playground, and Kylie was unable to send somebody from there to collect stuff from me, so I did get it over to her, but she said she was short of staff, and I just wondered how you managed to go about actually recruiting people.
Yeah, sure. At the moment, there is actually a live recruitment for youth workers. So we've got some recruitment out at the moment, and we've just completed our summer play recruitment. So as children come into summer holiday period, we have additional staffing, which has brought our numbers up to full. I would say that in terms of that particular site being short-staffed, isolation and self-isolating can have an impact on staffing as well at the moment, and we are having to make sure that we move people as needed to keep sites open, but so far we haven't had an issue. But they're advertised on the council website, all jobs in the usual way, and there is one open at the moment.
Maria, does that satisfy what you wanted to say? Yeah? Okay, that's lovely. Cal?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is quite a straightforward policy document, isn't it, that you'd expect of the service and of the council, but I would just take the opportunity, I guess, to praise the Play Youth and Community Service and the staff that work in it for the role that they play, particularly relevant to myself as a ward councillor, because a significant number of those settings are based within the wards on the various estates around, and I know the kind of really important work that they do, and I think the issue of safeguarding actually flags up that in that it's not just about providing spaces for people to go and play or rent rooms, etc. It's also about looking at people's kind of health and well-being in the rounds. So yeah, I thought it was just an interesting kind of reflection on that, and yeah, thank you for the report.
Thanks for that, Cal. Scott?
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. No, I think the recommendations for the report are quite simple. It's obviously to formalise what we're already doing. I will take the opportunity to ask Joe a couple of questions, and it really follows on from what Maria said about recruitment. I'd be remiss if my Paulsgrove colleagues didn't let me get you to ask what's happening with the splash pool and have we got enough staff to open it yet. So can you please give us an update on that one?
So our summer recruitment was really positive. We were oversubscribed and we had some great applicants. We managed to fill all of the places and we do have enough summer staff, yeah.
So, okay, so I can comfortably tell Councillor Hooper and Councillor New that the splash pool will be opening shortly, because if I don't ask the question, I'll be in trouble, basically what I'm saying. The only other thing was about e-safety, and I know it's obviously a fluid document and the document changes. I mean, how does that relate to the current online harm bill that's going through Parliament? You can have any sort of change to that as soon as that goes through?
So, working with the Portsmouth Safeguarding Children's Board, of course, there are frequently small changes to the policy. We aim to review it frequently to make sure it stays live. And yes, as those changes happen, they will be reflected in the policy.
Thank you, Joe. I just think it's a significant bill that's going through Parliament. I think with recent events in the last 2 months with regards to people on social media and online, so I think it's a very key part of the document. So I think when those changes do go through, I think it'd be just good to have it come back here and we can actually see it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Scott. If we'd have had a meeting last week, I would have said the same thing, because I was having a question being asked at me. It wouldn't have been at 25 to 5 unless it was 25 to 5 in the morning, given how those meetings go. But it was the same thing, and I've also been very keen to make sure that the splash pool is open this year, as it was before the virus hit in 2019 and also in 2018 as well. And I would like to share both Cal and Scott's points. It sounds really dull, a safeguarding policy, but it isn't. It's one of the most important and crucial documents that we have, particularly when you're just trying to improve kids' lives. And I'm tempted to say make children happy, but that never always works. But trying to improve kids' lives, absolutely crucial that we do safeguarding properly, as it's a place whereby people, young kids in particular, feel much more open and much more free to do things in a way without the peer pressure that exists at school or at home or with their peer friends or whatever. And so having a policy like this that deals with safety is very, very sensible. And so I agree with what Cal has said. With regards to what Scott has said, you know that I'm also keen to make sure that the online safety bill is incorporated fully. I suspect Cal, Scott and I have had a few negative comments once or twice on social media. We might be big enough and ugly enough to take it, but if you're 12, that might not happen. And it's absolutely crucial that we deal with this online safety bill as well. And yeah, any updates that will come back, even if it's just what we call information reports, it doesn't have to go the full rigmarole, would be very, very helpful, because it's crucial for parents to know what we're doing, because we know that several times at the adventure playgrounds the parents just let the kids go and they're always scared because it's their little one. So it's important to try and make sure that we know what we're doing. But with all that, I'm happy to sign that. I'm told that we've not done this for 15 months, we've all done this online. So I don't know whether I'm meant to sign something or whatever, but I'll sign it afterwards if necessary. But no, that's fine, Joan. Thank you very much indeed. I believe you can go home now, but I'm not your manager. So we move to the rough sleeping pathway. Now there are two authors on the publicised report, Paul Fielding, who cannot be here and sends his apologies, and Nicola Clanahan, who's mentioned it earlier. But we also have Sarah as well, who's the operational manager. I've got no idea who wants to do this first, second or last. So whatever worked in rehearsals for you, because I'm sure there were some.
I'm here to do the report,
Sarah.
and Sarah will answer any questions that come our way. Members received reports in July and December of 2020 which related to a bid proposal to MHCLG. The bid was successful and resulted in Portsmouth receiving £4.6 million of funding, which led to a rough sleeping pathway proposal heard at decision meeting in January of this year. The The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the progress of the pathway, specifically around the rough sleeping accommodation and support, the rough sleeping advice hub at Kingsway, and the new support contract for rough sleeping services within the pathway. The report provides an update in relation to securing 3 new buildings, the Registry, Elm Grove Library and Kingsway House, and confirms that following planning permission being agreed, the purchase was completed in March. Since completion, extensive works have been undertaken to ensure that the properties are suitable for supporting individuals off the streets, many of whom have complex needs. At the time of writing the report, 81 people were accommodated within the pathway. The next section of the report references the end of the temporary use of rooms in houses of multiple occupation. In July 2020, Cabinet approved an interim 12-month plan which included the use of houses of multiple occupation with floating support and move-on support to the private rented sector. A 12-month contract was negotiated with the housing network for the provision of 60 rooms until the end of August 21. Following the purchase of the properties referenced above, the demand for the rooms was removed, so the specific arrangement will end. Any service user who remains in these properties in August will be supported into alternative suitable accommodation. The report records thanks to the housing network for working with the service over the period. The next section of the report refers to the interim provision of support services for people within the pathway, which was necessary as the new contract to be procured was not due to start until October 21. The report records thanks to the interim providers, Society of St James and Two Saints, alongside other offices and support services for the delivery of support for the interim period. We go on to confirm the future support arrangements. Funded from a combination of MHCLG Rough Sleeping Action Programme funding and existing budgets from the Council's General Fund, the new support contract will be in place until April 2024, encompassing outreach and in-reach support and a rough sleeping advice hub in Kingsway House. The key principles of the service are to ensure the safety and well-being of individuals within the pathway, the delivery of flexible, person-centred support with multi-agency working to overcome the complex barriers faced by rough sleepers in sustaining accommodation, and seeks to ensure positive and meaningful relationships within the local community. The report confirms the contract award to the Society of St James, who had best demonstrated delivery against the principles, alongside opportunities for volunteering and mentoring and additional social value. The report provides an update on the Rough Sleeping Advice Hub, which will include the Homeless Day Service co-located at Kingsway House within the Rough Sleeping Pathway. Whilst there is a change of location for the day service, there will continue to be an open access drop-in where support can be offered and people can access facilities. More details will be agreed with the support provider and communicated in due course. The next section of the report confirms the oversight of services. Commissioners will meet on a quarterly basis to discuss service delivery, safeguarding, key performance indicators and any community issues. Key measures to support the service delivery include the number of people successfully moved on, the number of evictions and reason for the eviction, and the responsiveness of the support provider in assessing and supporting service user need. The City's Health and Wellbeing Board will be provided with updates and statistics as the contract progresses, alongside updates on progress reported to the City's Rough Sleeping and Homelessness Partnership Group.
That is. Thank you very much indeed, Nicola. That's excellent. Thank you for that. Maria, did you have anything you wanted to ask or comment on?
Just one quick comment. I'm really pleased about this report, and I would back the recording of thanks for the Society of St James and Two Saints for the work that they're doing. We still have rough sleepers in the city centre, and I'm getting a little tired of some of the people walking past making assumptions about why they are sleeping in the streets and why they are homeless. They're all on drugs, they're all alkies, they're all losers. And I try to explain to people there are as many reasons for being homeless as there are people. I was homeless myself for a while here in Portsmouth, and if it wasn't for the council taking me in, I wasn't literally on the street. I was lucky, a friend took me in. But the work that you're doing, I think, is really good. I'm really pleased about it. So, thank you.
Thank you for that, Maria. Scott.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. I think Maria's hit the nail on the head, to be honest. It's a very good report. I mean, I've just been reading through it again. I've just picked up on obviously 3.3.4. I think that's a really good part of the report, that obviously while the housing network, obviously we're ceasing to work with them, I think it's something to keep in mind for the future, in case there is some sort of issues again, that we have to lean on them for some support. I think it's a really good working practice, so my hats go off to you guys for that, and I think it's some feedback that you guys have taken on board as well, so I do appreciate that. 3.7.6, obviously in line with the duties with the City's Health and Wellbeing Board, provide updates and statistics about the service as the contract progresses. I also would think it would be quite handy, Councillor Sanders, if we could have that same update and a similar time, rather than say we all have to go into Health and Wellbeing Board. But I mean that's fundamentally in your gift. I think these updates are quite handy, especially for the council and to see, and for members of the public to actually see what we're doing. As a council, I think that's fundamentally important. And lastly, I just want to note on the award that the council have been given today of £117,000 from the government for the Rooms Respite programme, which I think is once again showing that the government have faith in the city to deliver on housing and homelessness issues. So once again, Portsmouth bids for money, and once again, Portsmouth gets money. So to the council officers, I think it's excellent that you guys are being trusted by government to spend taxpayers' money, and we're actually getting results on it and changing people's lives. So I think all the officers involved should really pat themselves on the back, because they're doing some excellent work. So on that front, I want to say thank you.
Thank you. Scott. Cal.
Thank you, Chair. Just start off by echoing the sentiments that have already been expressed, kind of thanking the service providers for what they've done over the course of the past couple of years, particularly where they've had to step in at very short notice to provide support, originally in the hotel settings and then in the buildings that were subsequently purchased. In terms of the relocation of the day service, I think that's something that makes sense, bringing it into a more central location in terms of other services, very close to the recovery hub and quite a bit closer to the city centre, where there are other services that people may also need to access. So I think that definitely makes sense. I'm curious about the long-term sustainability and options of the service. Clearly, at the moment, it's funded until, I think it was 2024, as a result of government grant. I guess the question in my mind is what happens then? Obviously, ideally, that grant gets renewed or expanded, but if not, what are the ongoing revenue costs that the council is potentially going to face in order to sustain that service? And if those costs can't be met, then what will be done with the buildings? If I could ask that question, I've got a few others following on. Thank you.
Is anyone in a position to answer Cal's question? Sarah.
It's probably not a full answer, Councillor Corkery, but
any answer will do.
In terms of actually exploring the future, I think that's going to be one of the things that the partnership group will be a key role in terms of looking at what those options are, what the funding options are, and obviously then exploring that fully with government as well. So that will be an ongoing piece of work now that we've been awarded that we, within all the members of the partnership board group, will need to pursue really. It's difficult to answer the question about what those specific revenue costs will be until we've begun that discussion, I think, really.
Did you have anything else, Cal? Does that answer your point?
Yeah. No, I appreciate it.
Did you have anything else?
It's a difficult question to answer at this stage.
Right.
I was just, I guess, preparing ourselves for that eventuality, and the figure, I guess, would be useful to know, maybe if not at this meeting, in terms of what the ongoing costs are now that we own the building, how much we're going to have to pay in support costs, etc., to sustain it. But yeah, perhaps we can be kind of updated on that outside of the meeting if it's not available at the moment. In terms of the government funding, I guess just picking up on the point that Scott made, it's probably worth reflecting on the massive reductions in government grants to local authorities that have happened over the years. We may now be getting a few grants here and there that are time limited, but that always leaves us kind of scrambling round to find out what's going to happen at the end of each contract. So personally, and I don't know about you, Councillor Saunders, but I'd prefer that we just return to the system we had before, where the government gave local authorities the funds that they needed to provide the services long term. I do have another question after that slight party political aside. clearly this service is, it seems to me it's an expansion of the supported housing services that we had already. So we already had similar services in terms of what was available at Hope House, and this is kind of an expansion of bed spaces essentially at different sites, in my view at least. And that works for some people. There are some people that are willing and able to go and live in that setting, and actually that provides them with the stability and the support that they need to go on and ends that period of homelessness. But the question I would like to ask is, what about the people for which those sit-ins aren't suitable? The people that for whatever reasons, and quite often they're very good reasons and very well made, they don't feel willing or able or safe to go and live in what is essentially a hostel environment. So yeah, that would be the question in my mind, is what support is currently available for those groups, and is there anything that we can do to kind of further expand those options for those individuals?
Thank you. Sarah, I know that didn't sound like a question, but it was. So what's your thoughts in terms of what Cal has said about future and accommodation and things like that?
So we have also got a lot of funding for private rented accommodation. So that's an additional source of accommodation for people with lower support needs that wasn't available to us before, for rough sleepers moving through the pathway and moving on. We look at an individualised, personalised housing plan for every person. So we are trying to make those plans bespoke. Clearly, obviously, they are group settings, but the accommodation at the registry is a lot more self-contained, so that's been quite a useful addition in terms of people having, their own room and their own microwave facilities and their own ensuite space. So, yes, so that helps a little bit with that. Other than that, we are looking at those individualised plans, and for those people on the streets, we will obviously look up whatever options are needed for that individual person in their plan. And I think we've learnt that sometimes it's not a solution which we can put people into, but actually starting from the individual people and working out what they need works. And we have done that in some cases and been able to successfully house people.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, the question in my mind was about those people that have significant support needs perhaps, or multiple and complex needs, for whom shared or kind of hostel or supported housing might not necessarily be suitable. And I know there's obviously the concept of housing first, which we've talked about a lot of times, and it seems to me that that model is designed specifically to meet the needs of those groups, in that it's about having kind of individual properties that aren't necessarily in a hostel or supported housing setup. And there's a lot of research to show that actually where that's been implemented, that's been very successful at targeting support at those people with the most significant needs and kind of histories of long-term homelessness. So yeah, I mean, that was the point I'll make around housing first. And just last question, if I may, Chair, in terms of move-on options from the current supported housing we have, what are those current move-on options, and do we think that they're sufficient, or is that something that needs to be looked at going forward to improve?
Sarah or Nicola again.
So the main move-on options for people achieving independence is around private renting. So we've got some funding to help people into the private rented sector, to help top up, and also some support for people, including money advice. So that will help with people moving on from hostels and from the pathway.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Cal, I suppose this is my turn. Sorry, Scott, yes?
Ask a couple of questions following on from...
You can, the idea is to ask as many questions as you like until you're happy. I'm told we're to be kicked out at 5:30, but I think we'll be okay.
It's just a quick question. It's just on a couple of points Cal made, actually. We're talking about 2024. Obviously, 2024, he talks about government, but the government's hypothetical, because obviously we're going to have an election before then, so the next grant funding could be any government of any colour. So I think that's points worth making. I think it'd probably be enough Conservative government, mind you, but let's make that point. Just a quick question. How much money has this council been given since the pandemic to help solve homelessness?
That's a really good question. I don't know off the top of my head. I'll have to come back to you.
I'd probably say it's well over £10 million.
You might. I can't confirm that number.
Could you confirm the number of how much this council was given before the pandemic, and probably in the years, I'd probably say between 2000 to 2020, to find out how much money they've been given by central government to solve homelessness?
Yep, I can come back to you on that.
I think, because if we want to have political dicks, we can look at the last Labour government and see how much money they gave, which was nothing.
I think I can't give you an exact answer, except the first, your first question is loads, and the answer to your second question is considerably less. And you did include 10 years of a Labour administration, 5 years of a coalition administration, which actually for council housing is very good for this city because it sorted out a few things that we were behind on, and 5 years of a Conservative administration. If you want a more detailed breakdown, which you might want to, I suspect you will, then I'm sure
I'd rather a detailed breakdown, because if we're going to have political pot shots about who spent what, I'd actually like the councillor to be informed.
That's absolutely fine, and I think the finance officer has already said he will go away and ask that. No, hang on, this is not a full council meeting. This is, no, okay, that's fine. Don't mind, I haven't said anything yet, so we wait. Hello, right, here we go. I'm going to get the teas in now.
No, I think it would just be useful to add to that finance report, the total in government grant has been cut to the local authority over that period as well. That's
okay. That's absolutely fine, and I'm delighted that but clearly you missed last Monday as full council special. At least it wasn't 10 hours, which is a distinct improvement. This is my turn, if that's okay. But thanks to both of you, actually, Cal and Scott, and sorry, Maria, I do apologise. I'm not used to this perspex box.
It's all right. It's actually nothing to do with finance. And I completely forgot it when I was speaking before. Society of St James have said that they have a commitment to delivering a minimum of 6 awareness talks to local community groups. Could we please have them to the Residents' Consortium when we're meeting properly?
And that's not one of the 6, by the way, because that will not be one of the 6, will it? It'll be another one on top, won't it?
Yeah, we can speak to the Society of St James about that.
Okay.
Ask if they can do that.
Anna from Democratic Services, could you minute that request, please? Yes, just so it's in a public record that people can actually look at. And actually, the idea of a public record that people can actually look at is one of the reasons why this is here. I asked for this to come here partly before it got into a party political match, because I was very keen to actually let people know where we are. This is to my mind, this is one of the best things this council's done in years. I'm delighted to have overseen it all, with a lot of great help from council officers, political colleagues, the homeless working groups like the Rough Sleeper Partnership Board, and most importantly, the people of this city. We are a revolution away from where we were in 2017. When the sort of stuff that Maria was talking about earlier was actually quite prevalent. I mean, I had the misfortune of being in a full council debate, which was pretty painful, about talking about rough sleepers in a very negative way, instead of actually talking about it in an individualised way, which is where we are now. So we are a world away from this, and the approach is incredibly, incredibly good. And although Scott was clearly wanting to try and praise the Conservative government, I don't blame him. I think it is fair to say that Portsmouth has got much, much more money than many Conservative councils across the country. Not because we've got a worse problem, but because actually we've got solutions, and a range of solutions that are tailored to individuals, as opposed to a one-size-fits-all policy, which actually fits in line with government policy. And I would say one of the interesting things around about 2017 was that government policy changed. And there's a target, and this comes back to Cal's point, there's a target to end rough sleeping by 2027. Now, nobody knows what that actually means. Nobody knows what qualifies as a rough sleeper. I mean, if the person doesn't want to get off the streets, so I ran into a vet in Helmand, an ex-vet from Helmand, outside Boots, being shouted at and given insults by kids, and all he said to me was, well, Boots is better than Helmand, which was impressive, but Does the government mean that those people have to be marched at gunpoint into housing? I don't think so. I think we need to treat people as individuals. And I think that's been one of the great joys of this whole collective approach working together. I want to try and deal with other individual points, if I may. Moving people into Kingsway and out of U House is something that I told residents in my ward who live opposite U House would happen in my re-election campaign, and I'm delighted it's happening because I think U House is a bad place for those sorts of people, and I think Kingsway is much, much better. The accommodation isn't, strictly speaking, hostel accommodation. It sounds a bit odd, but the government guidelines that we have got, particular Public Health England guidelines during the pandemic, have been that it's got to be safe and secure accommodation. You can share a bathroom, but that is about it. So it is not conventional hostel accommodation, certainly a world away from the day services that existed beforehand. I understand the point, and the point's a fair one. I think that's one of the things that we are trying to move away from. I think with regards to the points around the long-term provision, one of the things we've got to look at, and I'm asking the team to look at, is what happens after 2024. What I'm picking up at the moment is people are just grateful it's not a one-year grant round. And actually they can do some planning for 3 years. But I know with the discussions we are having with government, it's been a bit of a struggle to actually go, what are you going to do to stop us being back here in the first place, and what are you going to do to prevent homelessness? And that is part of the money that we are receiving now, because they've finally woken up to this fact, and that includes the respite care and the respite service that Scott mentioned earlier on, which is absolutely crucial. And I think also is a sea change in the public sector to move away from get people off the streets, which is the complete opposite of what we're doing as an administration, and as you well know, Cal, the complete opposite of the Housing First approach, into something whereby it's a case of, well, what do you want to do? Shaping Portsmouth, for instance, is now working with the team to actually get rough sleepers into employment. And we saw yesterday that there are rough sleepers who are in jobs already. They're just not in any homes. So we've got to try and make sure that we actually have a long-term sustainable programme. I think the short answer is, to your question is government doesn't know, but it's got a target of ending by 2027. But I think we've got a range of plans to try and deal with it. And if other people want to come with us, they can. I hope they do. Because otherwise, as you've rightly pointed out, Cal, we'll be back here again in a few years' time. And we'll be back begging for money again if we don't deal with prevention. As far as Scott mentioned, as far as the Health and Wellbeing Board is concerned, I'm a bit uneasy about having anything sent to the Health and Wellbeing Board because it's health and wellbeing. But I do believe, I do want to see further reports coming back here of what we're doing, because I don't think we've got anything to hide. In fact, I think we've got an incredibly good story to tell. And I think people want this to succeed. They want us to succeed. They're delighted we're getting the money. There was a discussion around funding earlier. I make the observation that pretty much since 1979, every single Conservative and Labour government, that includes one of which my lot were part, decided to cut money for local government. It was not brainy then, and it's not brainy now. I think that this government has made some improvements in terms of council work. I'm delighted they've put in place a target. We want to try and make sure we can honour it, meet it, and do better. So at the end of that vaguely party political rant, I'm delighted to receive. I can't approve this report, can I? Because it's not a decision-making report, Anna. I note it. Right. I note it with the one thing that was added from Maria, which is to make sure that the Residents' Consortium gets an additional talk from the Society of St James. But I think if the city wants to have any comments about this, please feel free. This is fantastic work, and long may it continue. And I believe that is the end of the meeting at 5 minutes past. Colleagues and comrades, thank you very much for coming. I may or may not see you again, or either in person, but I may well see you online. So thank you very much indeed, and have a safe trip home. Thank you very much.